The first howl came before the moon reached its highest point. Inside the tiny woodland cottage, Rowan Ashvale barely looked up from the trembling wolf pup sleeping beside her fireplace. The little creature whimpered in its dreams, one tiny paw twitching beneath the wool blanket she had stitched together from worn scraps. She dipped another strip of linen into a steaming bowl of herbs and gently wrapped it around the pup's injured leg with hands, so careful they hardly seemed to touch him at all. Outside, another howl answered the first. Then another. Then another. One by one, enormous shadows emerged from the snow-covered forest. They were not rogues. They were not wild hunters searching for prey. Silver crests shimmered faintly beneath the moonlight on their thick winter fur. Royal wolves. The Alpha King's wolves. Nearly 30 of them walked silently into the clearing surrounding Rowan's lonely cottage, forming a perfect circle that no creature dared cross. They neither scratched at her door nor begged for food. Their golden eyes remained fixed on the darkness beyond the trees, as though waiting for something that had not yet revealed itself. Inside, Rowan sighed softly, believing the howls belonged to distant hunting packs. She had no idea that the most feared wolves in the entire kingdom of Silverfang had chosen her home as the place they would defend with their lives. By dawn, frightened villagers stood frozen at the edge of the clearing. No one dared take another step. The wolves belonged to only one man, the Alpha King. Yet everyone in Silverfang knew one unbreakable truth. Royal wolves obeyed only their king. So why had they abandoned the palace, only to guard a forgotten healer's cottage every single night? And perhaps an even darker question lingered beneath the silent snowfall. If the wolves were watching the forest, what terrible thing was hiding among the trees? Long before anyone noticed the wolves, Rowan Ashvale had already become part of the forest's quiet rhythm. Every morning before sunrise, she left her little cottage carrying nothing more than a woven basket and a walking staff carved from old ash wood. Frost covered the narrow paths leading into Whispering Forest, where silver pines reached toward the pale winter sky like silent guardians. She gathered herbs buried beneath snow, collected frozen berries untouched by birds, and thanked every ancient tree beneath her breath as old Mira had taught her since childhood. The villagers often called her strange, not because she spoke with spirits or practiced forbidden magic, because she cared. She never asked who deserved saving. An injured hunter received the same care as a starving child. A wounded stag was treated no differently than a shepherd's old sheepdog. Even frightened ravens, caught in cruel traps, found gentle hands waiting to free them. To Rowan, pain never belonged to enemies or friends. Pain simply needed healing. Weeks earlier, while returning home through a heavy snowstorm, she had heard a low, exhausted growl beneath the wind. Most people would have walked away. Royal wolves were dangerous enough when healthy. An injured one could become far worse. Rowan hesitated only long enough to tighten her cloak before following the sound. Hidden beneath broken branches lay the largest wolf she had ever seen. His silver coat was stained with blood where an iron hunting trap had crushed his foreleg. Snow had frozen into the wound, and every breath came slower than the last. Golden eyes met hers, not with hatred, not with fear, only exhaustion. "You've suffered long enough," Rowan whispered. She moved slowly, never reaching for him until he had watched every movement. Her hands trembled as she unlocked the heavy trap with a rusted iron tool she carried for removing snares from deer. The wolf never snapped, never growled. He simply lowered his head, as though he understood. Dragging a creature nearly twice her weight through deep snow should have been impossible. Yet Rowan refused to leave him behind. She built a rough sled from fallen branches, tied it with rope, and spent hours pulling him home through blinding snowfall. Her shoulders bled where the ropes dug into her skin. Her hands blistered. Twice she collapsed into the snow. Twice she forced herself back to her feet. By the time they reached the cottage, darkness had swallowed the forest. Old Mira had stared at the enormous wolf lying unconscious across Rowan's floor. "You've brought death to your doorstep," the old woman warned. Rowan only smiled tiredly. "No," she answered quietly. "I brought someone home." For 12 days and 12 nights, she barely slept. She cleaned the infected wound with pine resin and mountain herbs. She spoon-fed the wolf warm broth when he was too weak to eat. When fever shook his body, she remained beside him until sunrise, replacing cool cloths across his brow again and again. Not once did she place a chain around his neck. Not once did she fear him. On the 13th morning, Rowan awoke to find the cottage empty. The wolf was gone. Only enormous paw prints remained outside her door, disappearing into fresh snow. She smiled softly. I hope you made it home. She never expected to see him again. But that same evening, just after sunset, a single silver wolf appeared beyond the tree line. He did not approach. He simply watched. The following night, 3 wolves came. Then 7. Within a week, the entire clearing surrounding the cottage filled with silent royal wolves who arrived every evening and disappeared with the dawn. They never asked for food, never threatened anyone, never crossed the invisible line surrounding her home. Instead, they faced outward toward the forest as though standing watch against an unseen enemy. The village awoke to whispers, then fear. Children stopped gathering firewood near Rowan's home. Merchants refused to deliver supplies. Hunters avoided the forest path entirely. It isn't natural, Bram the blacksmith muttered during a crowded meeting inside the village hall. No ordinary woman commands the king's wolves. Another villager crossed himself nervously. Perhaps she's cursed. Or perhaps, another whispered, she's a witch. Only old Mira remained silent. She watched the frightened faces around her and felt an old terror stirring inside her heart. A terror she had buried for decades. Far away, inside the towering halls of Silverfang Palace, another rumor reached another pair of ears. A scout knelt before the throne, his voice uneasy. My king. Every report tells the same story. Alpha King Kalen Thorn looked up from the kingdom maps spread before him. The royal wolves, the scout continued carefully, have abandoned their usual patrols. The king's expression hardened. Where have they gone? The scout swallowed. To guard a healer's cottage. Silence filled the throne room. Kalen's fingers slowly tightened around the carved armrest. His wolves had never disobeyed him. Not once. Yet somehow, every night, they were choosing someone else. And for the first time in many years, the Alpha King stood from his throne with a question no king should ever have to ask. Who, he said quietly, gave my wolves a command that I did not? The journey from Silverfang Palace to Ashvale Cottage took nearly 2 days through frozen mountain trails and dense pine forests, but Alpha King Kalen Thorn traveled alone. He wore no royal cloak. No silver crown rested upon his dark hair. Even the crest of the royal pack had been hidden beneath an ordinary hunter's coat. To anyone watching, he looked like another traveler seeking shelter before winter tightened its grip on the kingdom. Only his wolf knew the truth. Beneath the calm expression on his face, instinct wrestled with reason. Royal wolves did not abandon their king. They certainly did not gather around a stranger's home without command. Something impossible was happening, and impossible things had stolen enough from his family already. By the time the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Kalen had reached the ridge overlooking Rowan's cottage. He remained among the snow-covered pines, perfectly still. The clearing below glowed with warm firelight spilling from small windows frosted by winter. It looked impossibly ordinary. Smoke curled peacefully from the chimney. Bundles of dried herbs hung beneath the porch roof. A small wooden fence enclosed a garden, now sleeping beneath thick blankets of snow. Nothing about the cottage suggested power. Nothing suggested danger. Then the wolves came. One after another, silent shapes emerged from the forest exactly as the reports had described. Kalen recognized every one of them. Storm, Bracken, Ember, Frost, veterans who had fought beside him for years. Each should have acknowledged his presence the moment they caught his scent. Instead, not a single wolf looked toward him. They walked past the hidden Alpha King as though answering a call older than memory itself. The last wolf to enter the clearing was Ash. Even from a distance, his immense silver frame commanded respect. The oldest wolf in the kingdom stopped near the cottage door. For several long moments, he simply stood there. Then, in one slow movement, he lowered his head, not to Kalen, to the little cottage. The Alpha King's breath caught. Ash bowed to no one. Not even kings demanded it. Yet tonight, beneath a silent moon, the ancient wolf offered a gesture reserved only for sacred vows. Kalen felt something he had not experienced since childhood. Uncertainty. Morning arrived wrapped in pale golden light. Rather than revealing himself, Kalen continued watching from the forest. He expected Rowan Ashvale to step outside wearing charms, chanting forgotten spells, or somehow directing the wolves. Instead, the young woman opened her door carrying nothing more mysterious than a bucket of warm water. She smiled sleepily when she noticed several wolves still lying near the edge of the clearing. "Good morning." The greeting was so natural that Kaelin almost laughed. She spoke to royal wolves exactly as someone might greet friendly neighbors. None of them moved closer. None expected affection. Yet several ears lifted at the sound of her voice. Rowan filled a wooden trough with fresh water before scattering scraps of dried venison near the tree line. "You've hunted all night," she said softly. "You should eat something." Only the youngest wolves approached the food. Ash didn't. Instead, the great silver wolf watched Rowan with quiet eyes, filled not with obedience, but recognition. It disturbed Kaelin more than anything else. Recognition implied memory. The day unfolded with surprising simplicity. Villagers arrived one after another despite obvious fear. A farmer brought his limping sheepdog. A little girl clutched an injured raven whose wing hung awkwardly at its side. An elderly woodcutter struggled to breathe after weeks of illness. Rowan welcomed each of them without hesitation. She accepted payment only when people insisted. Sometimes she accepted vegetables, sometimes bread, often nothing at all. "I'll repay you after spring harvest," the woodcutter said apologetically. "You already have." Rowan smiled while preparing another bundle of herbs. "You planted those apple trees outside my cottage years ago. I still eat from them." The old man's eyes grew wet. "I'd forgotten." "I didn't." Kaelin watched in silence. She remembered kindness the way warriors remembered battles. Every small act mattered to her. Every life carried equal weight. Hours passed. When the villagers left, Rowan noticed movement beneath a thorn bush. A tiny fox cub whimpered softly, one paw trapped beneath fallen branches. Without hesitation, she knelt in the snow. "There you are." Her voice held the same warmth she had offered every patient that morning. She carefully freed the frightened animal despite several painful bites to her fingers. The cub trembled violently. Instead of forcing it to stay, Rowan wrapped it briefly inside her cloak until it calmed. Then she placed it gently near the forest. "You know where home is better than I do." The fox disappeared. Moments later, one of the royal wolves silently emerged from the trees. Instead of chasing the fox, he watched until the little creature vanished safely. Only then did he return to his place around the cottage. Kaelin frowned. Predator and prey, peacefully sharing the same clearing. Another impossibility. That evening, he decided observation was no longer enough. As darkness settled over Whispering Forest, Kaelin stepped from the shadows. Every wolf instantly noticed him. Their ears lifted, their bodies stiffened. Finally, recognition. The Alpha King spoke only one quiet command. "Return." It was a single word. Firm. Calm. Absolute. For generations, no royal wolf had ever ignored that command. Several younger wolves shifted uncertainly. A few even stood, but Ash remained exactly where he was. His golden eyes met Kaelin's. Not in defiance. Not in challenge. Simply refusal. One by one, every other wolf settled back onto the snow. None of them left. Silence stretched across the clearing. Kaelin repeated the order. Return. Nothing. The wolves had heard him. They understood, yet they chose to remain. The realization settled heavily inside him. Someone had not stolen his authority. Something older than his authority had awakened. Before he could step closer, Rowan opened her cottage door. She froze. A stranger stood among the wolves. The wolves, strangely, remained calm. "You'll freeze out there," she called gently. "I've made stew." Kaelin stared at her. She didn't ask who he was, didn't question why he stood surrounded by royal wolves. She simply saw someone standing alone in the cold, and offered warmth. Slowly, against every instinct telling him to leave, the Alpha King walked toward the little cottage. Behind him, Ash quietly rose and followed. As the ancient wolf crossed the threshold of Rowan's home, moonlight touched the frozen ground beneath the cottage. Faint silver lines shimmered beneath the snow. Ancient symbols, sleeping for centuries, beginning, at last, to awaken. Neither Rowan nor Kaelin noticed the glowing markings beneath the earth. But deep below the cottage, hidden beneath stone older than the kingdom itself, something answered the light. And after hundreds of years of silence, A forgotten sanctuary opened its eyes. The cottage felt smaller with another person inside. Not because Alpha King Kalen Thorne occupied much space. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who never wasted motion, but because his presence seemed to change the very air. Rowan noticed it immediately. He spoke little, accepted the wooden bowl of stew with a polite nod, and thanked her without the pride she had often seen in traveling nobles. "You live here alone?" he finally asked. Rowan smiled faintly while adding another log to the fire. "Not entirely." She glanced toward the enormous silver wolf curled beside the hearth. Ash had settled there as though the cottage had always belonged to him. "Apparently I have many unusual visitors these days." A corner of Kalen's mouth almost lifted. Almost. Outside, the rest of the royal wolves remained in perfect silence, their watch continuing beneath the pale moonlight. For several minutes neither of them spoke. The only sounds came from the crackling fire and the gentle wind brushing against the wooden walls. Then Rowan noticed the stranger studying the shelves lining her home. Glass jars filled with dried lavender, bundles of mountain sage, pressed flowers, small wooden carvings of wolves, and birds made by village children in exchange for medicine. Nothing expensive, nothing royal, only a life built one quiet kindness at a time. "You don't charge much," Kalen observed. "I charge enough, and if they cannot pay, they usually repay someone else." He looked at her. She shrugged. Kindness travels farther than coins. The answer lingered in his thoughts. Kings measured wealth in grain, soldiers in gold. This woman measured it in gratitude. No wonder the wolves remained. A sudden whine broke the silence. Ash had risen. The ancient wolf stood motionless near the center of the cottage floor, ears forward, eyes fixed on the worn wooden planks beneath his paws. He let out another low sound. Not a warning. A call. Rowan frowned. "What is it?" Ash tapped the floor once with his paw, then again, then lowered his head. Kalen's expression sharpened instantly. This isn't ordinary behavior. He knelt beside the wolf and rested one hand against the floorboards. For a moment, nothing. Then he felt it. A faint vibration, almost like a heartbeat. Slow, ancient, buried deep beneath the earth. Rowan noticed it too. "I've never felt that before." Ash stepped back. His gaze never left the floor. By lantern light, the three of them carefully pulled away a faded wool rug that had covered the center of the room for as long as Rowan could remember. The old wooden boards beneath it were strangely untouched by time. No rot, no cracks, only faint silver lines hidden beneath years of dust. Rowan brushed them clean with trembling fingers. The lines connected, curved, twisted, until they formed a perfect circle surrounding a single crescent moon carved into the wood itself. "I've lived here my entire life." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "How did I never see this?" Old Myra's words echoed suddenly in her memory. Some things reveal themselves only when the world is ready. A cold feeling settled in her chest. Without warning, the front door opened. Old Myra entered carrying a basket of herbs, but the moment her eyes fell upon the glowing symbol, every color drained from her face. The basket slipped from her hands. Glass bottles shattered across the floor. "No!" Her whisper trembled. "It cannot be." Rowan hurried toward her. "Myra, what's wrong?" The old woman stared at the symbol with haunted eyes. "I prayed this day would never come." The room fell silent. Even the fire seemed to quiet. Ash lowered himself respectfully before the old healer. Kalen noticed the gesture immediately. The ancient wolf recognized her as well. Not as a villager, as someone who remembered. Old Myra slowly sat beside the fire. Her weathered hands shook as though carrying the weight of decades. "I have hidden the truth from you all your life." Rowan's heartbeat quickened. "The truth about what?" "The truth about your parents." The words struck harder than any winter wind. Rowan had asked countless times as a child. Each time old Myra answered the same way. "They loved you. They protected you. They are gone. Never more." Now, for the first time, the silence ended. "They did not abandon you," Myra said softly. "They died." Rowan's breath caught. "They died protecting this place." She looked around the tiny cottage in disbelief. "This cottage?" "No." Myra slowly raised one trembling finger toward the glowing circle beneath the floor. "What lies beneath it?" The old healer explained that centuries before the kingdom of Silverfang existed, long before Alpha Kings ruled the northern forests. A sacred order known as the Moon Guardians had protected an ancient sanctuary hidden beneath these lands. They were not rulers. They were keepers. They maintained a seal that imprisoned something the world had long forgotten. Only one bloodline could preserve it, generation after generation, until almost everyone believed the Moon Guardians had vanished forever. They did not vanish, Mira whispered. They were hunted. Kaelin's expression darkened. By whom? Those who feared what the Guardians protected. Rowan felt her knees weaken. My parents. They were the last known Guardians. They knew enemies were coming. So they placed you here, where no one would think to look. Tears blurred Rowan's vision. All these years, she had believed she had been left behind. Instead, she had been loved enough to be hidden. Loved enough for two people to give everything, so she might live. Ash rose once more. He walked toward the glowing circle. This time, instead of touching it with his paw, he rested his forehead gently against the symbol. The silver lines brightened instantly. A deep rumble echoed beneath the cottage. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The wooden circle slowly separated into ancient stone beneath. A hidden staircase emerged. Cold air flowed upward, carrying the scent of untouched centuries. No one spoke. Even Kaelin felt the weight of history pressing against his chest. Ash looked toward Rowan, then toward the staircase. He wasn't asking. He was inviting. Lantern in hand, Rowan descended first. Not because she was fearless, because this had been her home all her life. If something slept beneath it, she needed to know why. Kaelin walked beside her. Not ahead, not behind. Beside. The stone steps spiraled downward until they opened into an immense underground chamber untouched by time. Crystal veins glowed softly within the walls. Ancient pillars carved with wolves and crescent moons stretched into darkness. At the chamber's center stood a circular altar surrounded by dozens of stone wolves frozen in silent vigil. None faced inward. Every one of them faced outward, guarding, waiting, just as the royal wolves had done around Rowan's cottage, as though repeating a duty they had never forgotten. Then Rowan's lantern illuminated the far wall. She stopped breathing. Carved into polished white stone was an enormous mural. A young woman stood surrounded by wolves beneath a full moon. Her face, her eyes, even the small scar near her eyebrow, matched Rowan perfectly. The carving had existed for hundreds of years, yet it bore the face of someone who had only lived for 23. Kaelin stared at the mural in stunned silence. Old Mira slowly closed her eyes. The sanctuary remembers its guardian, and somewhere beyond the chamber, hidden within the deepest shadows, something ancient stirred for the very first time. The mural should have been impossible, yet it had carved Rowan's face centuries before she was born. The greater mystery was no longer whether she belonged to the Moon Guardians. It was who had known she would come, and why they had been waiting for her all this time. No one spoke for several heartbeats. The underground sanctuary was so still that Rowan could hear the quiet crackle of her lantern and the slow rhythm of her own breathing. The mural towered above them, carved with impossible precision into a wall of white stone that time itself had failed to weather. She stepped closer. Every detail matched. The curve of the woman's smile, the loose braid falling over one shoulder, even the tiny scar just above her left eyebrow, the one Rowan had carried since falling from an apple tree as a child. She reached out with trembling fingers, but stopped just short of the stone. "I've never been here before," she whispered. "So how?" Kaelin remained silent. For years he had dismissed every tale of ancient prophecies as dangerous fantasies. His father's death had been born from blind faith in an old seer's vision, and since then he had trusted only what could be seen, measured, and proven. Yet nothing before him could be explained by reason alone. The sanctuary had waited, the wolves had remembered, and the woman standing beside him had been carved into history centuries before her birth. For the first time in many years, certainty abandoned the Alpha King. Ash walked calmly to the center of the chamber. The ancient wolf stopped before the circular altar and lowered himself onto the cold stone floor. One by one, the wolves carved around the altar began to glow with faint silver light. Not moving, not alive, yet somehow awake. Soft lines spread across the floor like moonlight flowing through frozen rivers. The symbols connected until they reached Rowan's boots. The air became warmer, not from fire, from memory. A voice echoed gently through the chamber. Neither male nor female. Old beyond imagination. When the final guardian returns, the pack shall remember. Rowan looked around in alarm. Who said that? Old Mira bowed her head. No one living. The voice continued. The oath cannot be broken. The wolves shall guard the blood. The guardian shall protect the seal. Until moon and dawn become one. Then, silence returned. Even the glowing symbols slowly faded. Only Ash remained motionless before the altar, as though he had heard those words countless times before. Old Mira slowly approached one of the ancient pillars. Hidden among the carvings rested a stone tablet sealed beneath crystal. She brushed away centuries of dust. This is what your parents died protecting. The crystal cracked with surprising ease. Inside lay a tightly rolled scroll preserved by strange silver threads. Mira carefully opened it. Ancient writing shimmered across the parchment. Kaelin recognized none of the language. Rowan somehow understood every word. She read aloud without realizing she was doing so. When darkness stirs beneath the roots of Silverfang, the last moon guardian shall awaken. No crown shall command the wolves. Only the ancient promise. The first guardian entrusted the royal pack not to kings, but to those who preserve the balance between mankind and the wild. The words echoed heavily through the sanctuary. Kaelin felt something inside him quietly shift. His authority had never truly been challenged. It had simply never been the highest authority. The wolves had not betrayed him. They had fulfilled an oath older than every Alpha King who had ever ruled. Rowan lowered the scroll slowly. So they aren't protecting me because I'm important. Old Mira smiled sadly. No, they're protecting what you are willing to protect. The distinction settled deeply within Rowan. Destiny alone meant nothing. Choice meant everything. Her parents had chosen. Now, the same choice belonged to her. A sudden growl shattered the silence. Every living wolf in the chamber lifted its head at once. Ash stood instantly, his ears pressed flat against his skull. His calm eyes hardened into warning. Kaelin reacted without hesitation, his hand moving instinctively to the sword resting against his back. What is it? The answer came not from the wolves, but from the earth itself. A violent tremor rippled beneath their feet. Dust rained from the ceiling. Far beyond the sanctuary, something roared. The sound was unlike any creature Rowan had ever heard. It was deeper than thunder, older than wolves, filled with endless hunger. The roar lasted only seconds, but when it faded, every torch inside the sanctuary extinguished simultaneously. Only the silver symbols continued glowing beneath Rowan's feet. When they finally climbed back into the cottage, dawn had already begun painting the eastern sky. The royal wolves remained exactly where they had been before, watching, waiting. Only now Rowan understood why. They were not guarding a house. They were guarding a prison. News traveled faster than winter winds. Before sunset, whispers had reached Silverfang Palace. Not through honest witnesses, through frightened rumors. Lady Seraphine Vale stood before the royal council, wearing an expression carefully balanced between concern and certainty. The healer has uncovered forbidden ruins. Several nobles exchanged uneasy glances. Another counselor frowned. Ancient ruins are hardly a crime. Seraphine folded her hands gracefully. They are, if they awaken forgotten powers. She allowed silence to linger, then continued. Our scouts report that the king's wolves now refuse direct commands. The chamber stirred uneasily. Imagine, she said softly, what happens when the people discover that even the Alpha King no longer controls his own pack. The words landed exactly as she intended, not as an accusation, as fear. Fear was easier to spread than lies. By evening, the council was divided. Some believed Rowan should be protected. Others believed she should be imprisoned until the mystery could be understood. A few quietly suggested eliminating the problem before prophecy became reality. Only one chair remained empty. The Alpha King's. Kaelin had not yet returned. Seraphine smiled to herself. Every hour of his absence made uncertainty stronger, and uncertainty was fertile ground for ambition. Back at Ashvale Cottage, Rowan sat alone on the porch steps wrapped in a thick wool blanket. The forest was unusually quiet. Ash approached without a sound and rested beside her. She leaned gently against his broad shoulder. I don't know if I can do this. The old wolf didn't move. He simply stayed. Sometimes companionship required no words, only presence. A few moments later, Footsteps crunched softly through the snow. Kalen emerged from the trees, carrying fresh firewood. Without speaking, he stacked it neatly beside the cottage wall. Only after finishing did he look toward Rowan. "You don't have to carry this alone." She searched his face. There was no command in his eyes. No expectation. Only quiet certainty. She smiled faintly. "For someone who speaks so little. You say the right things." A rare hint of warmth crossed his expression. "I've had good teachers." For the first time since learning the truth about her parents, Rowan laughed. It was soft, brief, but genuine. Ash quietly closed his eyes. The sound seemed to satisfy him more than any victory. As night settled over Whispering Forest, every royal wolf slowly rose. Then, in perfect silence, the entire pack turned toward Rowan. One after another, they lowered themselves until their foreheads touched the snow. The ancient guardian vigil. A gesture unseen for centuries. Not to a queen, not to a ruler, but to the one they had waited generations to find. Hidden among distant trees, unseen by everyone in the clearing, a cloaked figure watched the ceremony with cold satisfaction. Lady Seraphine slowly closed her gloved hand around a small iron key she had stolen from the sanctuary, while the others searched its outer chambers earlier that morning. She whispered into the darkness, "If the wolves remember, I'll make certain the monsters do as well." As Rowan accepted the wolf's ancient vow, Seraphine rode toward the forgotten prison carrying the only key capable of breaking its seal. By the next moonrise, the kingdom would learn that some promises were meant to protect the world, and others had been waiting centuries to be broken. The wind changed before anyone noticed the danger. It carried no scent of pine, no trace of fresh snow. Instead, it brought an icy emptiness that silenced the forest itself. The birds disappeared first. Then the rabbits vanished into hidden burrows. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Ash lifted his massive head from beside Rowan's porch before dawn had fully broken. A low growl rolled deep inside his chest. Not loud, not threatening, ancient. One after another, every royal wolf surrounding the cottage rose to its feet. Their ears pointed toward the northern forest, their muscles tense beneath thick silver coats. Rowan stepped outside, wrapping her cloak tightly around herself. "What is it?" Ash walked to the edge of the clearing and stopped. His eyes never left the darkness between the pines. Something was coming. Something the wolves had feared long before Rowan had been born. At that same moment, miles away beneath the forgotten sanctuary, Lady Seraphine stood before the ancient stone gate. The stolen iron key rested in her trembling hand. She had imagined this moment for years, not because she desired chaos, but because she feared prophecy. Her family had spent generations building influence within Silverfang. Kings changed, councils shifted, yet House Vale endured because it believed one truth above all others. Power belonged in human hands, not in forgotten bloodlines. "If Rowan lives," Seraphine whispered to herself, "the kingdom will belong to legends again." She pushed the key into the ancient lock. For one brief heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the mechanism groaned. Stone scraped against stone. A narrow crack appeared across the massive gate. Cold black mist slipped through the opening. It flowed across the floor like living smoke. From somewhere beyond the darkness, hundreds of glowing eyes slowly opened. Seraphine stepped backward. "What have I?" A roar answered her. The sound shook the chamber so violently that dust poured from the ceiling. The gate burst inward. Something enormous struck the stone with enough force to split it apart. Seraphine fled without looking back. She had wanted proof that Rowan was dangerous. Instead, she had awakened something that had never been meant to see the sky again. The first shadow beast reached the forest by sunset. It resembled a wolf, only in shape. Its body was formed from shifting darkness, as though night itself had grown teeth and claws. Its eyes burned pale blue without warmth or mercy. Wherever it stepped, snow melted into black water. Trees withered. Life retreated. Ash released a thunderous howl. The entire royal pack answered instantly. Their formation changed, no longer surrounding only Rowan's cottage. They spread outward, creating a living wall between the advancing darkness and the village beyond. The battle had begun. The villagers heard the howls before they saw the creatures. Panic spread through Ashvale. Doors slammed shut. Children cried. Men reached for old hunting spears, they had not used in years. Bram, the village blacksmith, stood frozen outside his forge. Only days earlier he had called Rowan a witch. Now he watched the wolves place themselves between the village and the approaching shadows. None retreated. None abandoned the people who had feared them. Bram lowered his hammer slowly. We were wrong. No one answered, because everyone knew he was right. Kaelin arrived just as the first beast lunged from the trees. The Alpha King never shouted, never wasted movement. His sword flashed once beneath the moonlight. Silver steel struck Shadow. The creature staggered backward, but instead of bleeding, black mist poured from the wound before knitting itself together again. It cannot be killed, one warrior gasped. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. No, it can. We simply haven't learned how. Another beast burst from the forest. Then another. Then dozens. The wolves charged together. Snow exploded beneath powerful paws as silver and darkness collided across the clearing. The night filled with growls, shattered branches, and flashes of moonlit steel. Rowan ran toward the wounded without thinking. One young wolf collapsed near the garden fence, a black wound spreading across his shoulder. She knelt beside him immediately. It's all right. You'll be all right. The corruption surrounding the wound writhed like smoke beneath his fur. She reached for clean bandages, then stopped. Something inside her whispered. Not words. A feeling. Do not fear it. Understand it. Rowan placed her bare hand gently against the black wound. Instead of resisting, the darkness slowed. The wolf's frantic breathing steadied. The blue corruption faded beneath her touch like frost melting beneath spring sunlight. The wound remained, but the fear vanished. The wolf looked at her with calm golden eyes before rising once again. Kaelin witnessed everything. So did Ash. Neither spoke, but both understood. Rowan possessed no gift for commanding wolves. She possessed something far rarer. She quieted fear itself. The realization spread quickly. Every injured wolf instinctively sought Rowan, not because she healed faster than others, because the ancient terror inside the shadow beasts lost its power whenever she drew near. Even frightened villagers noticed. Children hiding behind wagons slowly stepped toward her. Warriors who had begun retreating found their courage returning. The panic faded. Hope replaced it, not through magic, through presence, through compassion, exactly as it always had. Only now, the entire kingdom could see it. Far across the battlefield, Seraphine emerged from the trees. Her elegant cloak hung torn and stained with ash. She stared in horror at the destruction surrounding the village. This wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered. Kaelin heard her. Their eyes met across the snow. Understanding struck instantly. You opened the gate. She couldn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth stood between them. Ash growled, not with hatred, with disappointment. Seraphine lowered her head. For the first time in her carefully controlled life, she understood the difference between ambition and wisdom. A deafening roar echoed across the valley. The ground cracked open near the forest's edge. From the widening fissure emerged a creature larger than any wolf alive. Its body was formed from ancient shadow wrapped around massive bones older than kingdoms. Its eyes locked onto Rowan alone. Not the king. Not the wolves. Her. Old Myra's face turned pale. It remembers. Rowan looked toward her. What remembers? The last guardian. Before anyone could ask another question, the beast charged. Ash leaped first. The ancient wolf slammed into the monster with every ounce of strength left in his aging body. The impact shook the frozen earth. For a single glorious moment, the creature stopped. Then one enormous claw swept through the air. Ash was thrown violently across the clearing. He struck an ancient oak with a sickening crack before collapsing into the snow. Ash! Rowan's cry pierced the battlefield. Without hesitation, she ran toward him. Kaelin reached for her arm. Don't! But she was already moving. Ash struggled to lift his head. Blood stained his silver fur. Yet even now, his eyes weren't fixed on Rowan. They looked beyond her, toward the distant mountains, toward a place older than the sanctuary itself. With the last of his strength, the ancient wolf slowly lifted his muzzle and released a long, haunting howl. It was not a cry for help. It was a summons, a direction, the call of a guardian who knew exactly where the final battle had to be fought. Then Ash collapsed, unconscious, his muzzle pointing toward the snow-covered peaks where the ancient stone circle waited beneath the moon. As Rowan knelt beside the fallen wolf who had protected her from the beginning, his final howl echoed through every mountain in Silverfang. Somewhere beyond the frozen peaks, something ancient answered, and Rowan realized the wolves had never been leading her home. They had been leading her here all along. Ash's howl lingered in the frozen mountains long after his body fell still. The battlefield seemed to pause. Even the shadow beasts hesitated, their glowing blue eyes lifting toward the northern peaks as if recognizing the ancient call. Rowan dropped to her knees beside the great silver wolf. Blood darkened his thick winter coat, spreading slowly across the snow she had walked so many mornings in search of healing herbs. She placed trembling hands against his neck, desperate to feel the steady pulse that had comforted her since the wolves first surrounded her cottage. It was there, faint, weak, but alive. Relief caught in her throat before tears could. "You promised you'd come home every morning," she whispered, brushing frost from his muzzle. "You don't get to break that promise now." Ash did not open his eyes, yet one ear twitched ever so slightly, as though somewhere deep within his fading strength he had heard her. Kalen stepped beside her, his sword still streaked with black mist from the battle. Around them, warriors and wolves formed a defensive circle, while the remaining shadow beasts withdrew into the forest instead of pressing their advantage. "They're retreating," Bram said in disbelief. Old Mira slowly shook her head. "No, they're waiting." The words settled over everyone like another layer of winter. Waiting implied purpose. Waiting meant the battle was not over. It had only changed its shape. The sky had turned the pale gray that comes just before another snowfall. Kalen looked toward the distant mountain ridge, where Ash's howl had echoed. "The stone circle." Old Mira nodded. "The prison was never meant to destroy the darkness. It was only meant to contain it. And the stone circle, it is where the seal can be restored." Silence followed. Every person gathered there understood what those words meant. They would have to leave the safety of the village. They would have to walk willingly toward the place where the ancient evil was strongest. No one argued. A simple wooden sled was built for Ash. Not by royal soldiers, by the villagers. Bram worked beside farmers who had once refused to step near Rowan's cottage. The same hands that had pointed accusing fingers only days before now carefully tied thick blankets around the wounded wolf to keep him warm against the mountain wind. When the sled was finished, Bram rested one rough hand against Ash's shoulder. "I judged you by fear," he murmured. "I won't make that mistake again." Rowan watched quietly. Forgiveness often arrived without speeches. Sometimes it looked like tired hands choosing to help. The journey north began before sunset. Snow drifted steadily through the ancient pines as the royal wolves surrounded the travelers, not as guards alone, but as companions. No commands were spoken. No horns announced the march. The pack moved with a shared purpose older than any kingdom. Rowan walked near the front, one hand resting lightly on Ash's sled whenever the path grew steep. Kalen stayed nearby, never hovering, never trying to take control, only making certain the trail ahead remained safe. Hours passed in comfortable silence before Rowan finally spoke. "When you first came to my cottage," he glanced toward her, "you already knew who I was? I knew your name. And now," he considered the question carefully, "now I'm still learning who you are." She smiled faintly. "I was afraid you'd say I was some great legend. You aren't." Her smile faltered. Then Kalen continued, "You're someone who chooses kindness even when no one is watching. I think that's far more difficult." The words warmed her more than the heavy cloak wrapped around her shoulders. It was the first time anyone had admired her for the life she had lived, not the blood she had inherited. Near midnight the mountains opened into a vast frozen valley. At its center stood 12 enormous stone pillars arranged in a perfect circle. Moonlight bathed each pillar in pale silver, revealing carvings of wolves running beside cloaked guardians beneath a sky full of stars. The air itself felt different, still, ancient, as though every snowfall of the last 1,000 years had been waiting for this night. The wolves stopped walking. One by one they lowered their heads, not in surrender, in reverence. Ash, though still unconscious, released a slow breath. The faint silver mark beneath his fur began to glow. The same light answered from every stone surrounding the circle. Then, the ground trembled, A deep crack spread across the frozen earth beyond the pillars. Black mist poured upward in twisting columns. The temperature dropped so suddenly that frost formed across swords, cloaks, and even eyelashes. The shadow beasts had arrived. Only this time they did not attack immediately. They gathered around the valley in complete silence, watching, waiting. And then the largest among them stepped forward. Its towering form rose above the others like a mountain of living night. When it spoke, its voice sounded less like words and more like ancient stone grinding against itself. "Guardian," its burning eyes fixed upon Rowan. "You have returned." Rowan's heartbeat thundered inside her chest. "I don't know you." "You do." The creature lifted one enormous claw toward the stone circle. "Your soul remembers." Before Rowan could answer, the symbols carved into the pillars blazed with brilliant silver light. A warm glow spread beneath her feet, flowing toward the very center of the circle where an empty stone altar slowly emerged from beneath the snow. Old Myra's voice trembled. "The Guardian right. It has begun." Kaelin instinctively stepped toward Rowan. She looked at him, fear flickering across her face for the first time since the journey had begun. "What if I'm not enough?" He met her eyes with calm certainty. "You've never needed ancient blood to save others. You've done that every day of your life. This won't change who you are." His words steadied her, not because they erased her fear, but because they reminded her that courage was never the absence of it. Rowan took one slow breath. Then she stepped toward the glowing altar. Behind her, every royal wolf raised its head to the moon. Ahead of her, the ancient darkness waited, and above the silent valley, the full moon finally broke through the clouds, bathing the stone circle in silver as the forgotten rite began.